Great. I think we'll make a start. There's a good number of us already in the room, so let's begin. Just to introduce myself, I'm Graham Blake, and I have the privilege of leading Hope Church in Norfolk. And I have been part of the Pioneer Network with our church for about 3 or 4 years now, so that's great. Just to make sure that we're all in the right seminar, this is the one that's called Taking Your Church Through Change. Taking Your Church Through Change. I guess we're all aware of how much change we've been in the last year, and I guess there are going to be some things that have changed forever. But how do we learn to navigate and lead change? What about things like growth and multiplication? How do we understand our culture? And what about some of the blockers that could get in our way when it comes to change and moving forward? It's an absolute joy and honour to welcome Colin Barron with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Colin is the team leader of Christchurch, Manchester, which is a multi-site church all around the Greater Manchester area. He's also the co-author of a book called Multi-Planting, and I will put the details of where you can get that in a little while on the chat. And he's also the founder of a network called The Broadcast, and I'll also put the website up, which is a webinar for helping leaders develop and also helping them change for growth. Okay, so Colin, great to have you with us this afternoon. What we're going to do, we're going to hand over to Colin. Colin's going to lead us through some sections of his teaching this afternoon, and then he's very open for us to ask questions at different stages, so we don't have to wait till the end to ask our questions. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply jot down some of your questions, so please put your questions in the chat, and then I'll make a note of some of those questions, and then I'll mute and go quiet, and Colin will take over, and then we'll just come in with some questions. In discussion with Colin, he's very happy for us to come back at him with observations and questions. He's traveled extensively around the world, been part of doing this for many, many years, helping churches grow and multiply in lots of different locations around Great Britain and also the United States. So Colin, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here this afternoon, and I'm gonna hand over to you. It's great to see you. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks very much. It's great to be here. It's great to be with you all, and want to do this seminar. And just another way of putting the seminar is change for growth. And you know, there's a phrase that's going around now quite regular, which is the new normal. I don't know how many times that has been said, whether it's in church or in society, and it's become really, really popular. And it's done a couple of things. One is it's obviously put some language to things that are going to have to change as we come out of the COVID pandemic, and it's also unnerved quite a few people, because some people are thinking, do I need to change? What needs to change? And sometimes the answer is no. I was talking to a church planter a couple of days ago, and I think he was agitated because he felt like I should be changing stuff, but it's actually been going quite well. My church is growing even through the pandemic. So I want to touch on some of those things as well this afternoon. But you know, initiating and navigating and leading change is challenging anyway, and it's going to be even more challenging as we come out of this global pandemic. The sad truth is that a lot of change actually doesn't produce the fruits that people want. And Harvard Business School did a report on I think it was the 100 top businesses in the United States who had initiated change so that they could grow in areas of their market share, productivity, etc. And it came out with this kind of damning statistic can't get it out of my mouth, that less than 50% actually achieved what they wanted to achieve. And it was even lower than that. Now, the reality is I've been helping lead the New Frontiers movement for 15, 20 years. been through 2 transitions, and also building 2 multi-site churches and helping other churches. And what I realize is, as I'm going around and helping people, is actually a lot of people try to initiate change, and unfortunately in churches the statistics probably anecdotally are similar to what they are in business, that a lot of change just doesn't produce the actual goods that people want. And so I want to look briefly, in an hour you can do it only very briefly, at 5 keys, 5 areas that I think are important as we're looking at change. But this is a kind of brief snapshot, and actually on our broadcast website we're running some longer term webinars for church leaders, movement leaders and church planters to actually open up a lot of these things. So these are the things I want to go through. I'm going to share my screen, and it's always a little awkward on this platform. So let's just see how it goes. So these are the areas that I want to look at: creating urgency, defining success, overcoming blockers, changing culture, and short-term wins. And we'll go through all of those as quickly as we can. And after each section, we'll just have some questions so that we can kind of see if we're communicating and if there's things that people want to feed back on. So first thing is creating urgency. And it sounds like, well, isn't this obvious? Well, naturally a lot of churches are quite happy where they are, and a lot of leadership teams are. I remember going into a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, into a church leadership team, 200 people, and it'd been about that number for years, maybe even a decade or longer. And they were just talking about the fact that they wanted to grow, and we were having a meal together. And as they were talking, I realized that actually there wasn't that much passion for growth. There was, they wanted it, but it was like everything was hedged by when we get a new building, we'll be able to grow, or we've got too many kids for the Sunday school teachers. You know what I mean? So it was this kind of conversation that seemed to go round and round in circles. And at one time I stopped it. I said, does anyone ever have a sleepless night here that actually your church hasn't grown for 10 years? And in the end, the senior leader says, look, I do. And then I of course, I realized that's why I'd invited me in. But you can see that actually, even though there was a kind of a genuine consensus that would be good to grow and it would be great to try and navigate growth, actually the urgency really wasn't there. I read an article the other day about a coach called David Artel, who was the Crew Alexander manager, or maybe still is the Crew Alexander manager. And he said 2 or 3 years ago, they were near the bottom of Division 2, which is the bottom league of the professional league. And they were just lost 4-0. And the trajectory was they were going to go out of the football league. And he said, I had to get the players to understand that if this happened, most of them will be out of a job. And because actually they wouldn't be able to walk into another football job, some of them would, he said, some of them I told will be milkmen and other things like that. And basically what he was doing was trying to get some urgency into a group of players and giving them a reality check that if things didn't change, then things would be very bad. So I want to just look at some motivators that we see in the Bible and in life that just can help us to create urgency and help people to go from kind of passivity or doing okay and to actually engage in the process of change for good. So some motivators that I've found. First is compassion. Actually, we see it in Matthew 9:35 when Jesus is going from village to village and it says healing everybody with his team. He suddenly in his mind saw the multitudes in the nation of Israel that he couldn't get to. And it says he had compassion on the multitude. And actually that compassion got him to create a multiplication effect. He actually got his disciples into teams of 2 to send them out. But there was something that moved him, that moved his disciples to go from something that was actually reasonably successful, to say the least, having a village all healed, etc., etc., but suddenly to go to 6 villages, and then he did it with 70 and sent the 72 out as well. So compassion is a motivator. Time, urgent time. The other thing that was urgent for Jesus was he knew he was going to Jerusalem. He knew he was going to face death, and he wanted to get to every village and so in Israel if he could before he went to Israel. So what I'm trying to say is sometimes you have to help people to see the urgency through compassion, through the fact that actually there's a time limit on this. I think a third motivator is prophetic words. 25, 30 years ago, I had a prophetic word that when I moved to Manchester, I should plant 20 churches. And I'd planted a couple before. And it actually helped me plant my first multi-site, which actually we got to 8 people. 8 churches, sorry, not 8 people. And then went to America. They all became independent churches, started again. And, I was getting to 60, I'm 65 this year, and about 63. And, you're kind of thinking, retiring, you're thinking, slowing up. And then Mike Bill actually gave me a prophetic word at a meeting. He didn't know me really well and didn't know what I was doing. And he basically said, look, the words that God has given you, the dream that God has given you, it's not finished. That actually it was from him. And it just went on, and it really galvanized me. And I shared that prophetic word with our team. The outcome of that is we're actually in our new multi-site. We've got 4 sites, 5 meetings. We're going to now start 6 new meetings. And this prophetic word just galvanized me. It's a bit like Hudson Taylor. I was reading him last summer as well, when he was on Brighton Beach thinking about the nation of China and the multitudes that needed reaching. And basically, he felt God speak to him to actually get, I think it's 22 missionaries and a couple for Mongolia as well. So what I'm trying to say is, to create urgency, there are different ways of doing it, and God will help us use different ways. The needs in our society, just helping people see the needs, especially coming out of this pandemic, just society's need for community. There's mental health issues. There's a need for the church to grow. There's a need for the church to move into different societies. I was on a group this morning, some Indian people were starting a little Hindi speaking group, because there's a lot of Hindi people coming over, speaking people, nurses, etc., into Manchester. We've just started a Spanish speaking people group as well. What I'm trying to say is, seeing the needs of people actually motivates people, gives them a sense of urgency to get things done. So maybe the state of your church, and people realizing actually if we don't grow, we're going to die. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that urgency is massively important. If people don't feel urgent about it, actually, even though they feel like it's a good idea, they're not going to go through the change that's going to be made happen. And I think there's 2 other factors that are kind of outcomes and part of this urgency. And one is faith, and it's like everything I'm going to say, faith is in it. So it's like every section, that faith. In the end, we are helping people to have faith that God can do stuff. And often when we're creating urgency, we're creating it into a group of people that actually don't have the faith to see it all happen. That actually we're helping people develop their faith. And I realize this, that faith grows over time. So that actually when we are, and what Jesus was doing when he was sending out his 12, he said this, look, pray to the Lord of the harvest for more workers. He was helping them through the urgency to also increase their faith that God could provide people and also the resources they need. And this last thing in this section is momentum. Because when you're creating urgency, you are wanting to create some momentum. And momentum is a hard thing. It's the thing every leader longs for, to get momentum and to keep momentum. But sometimes momentum is a bit like a steam engine. To start with, you just put in a lot of coal, a lot of fuel into the boiler as it creates enough steam to actually get momentum. And actually getting that first traction, first momentum, sometimes takes a lot of effort. In fact, in my opinion, over years of planting, leading, helping lead movements and helping develop spheres of churches, getting that momentum is really, really important. So there's lots of other things I could say about this, but I think I'm just helping us see, without urgency, actually, we're not going to get any change. And without the people, the leadership team, and a good proportion of people in the church feeling the urgency, then actually we're not going to get anywhere. So I don't know if there's any questions on this that before we go on to the next thing I want to say. Graham.
Onto Sam. Colin, that was one of the things that came to me straight away there, was that the critical mass, I guess there are mostly leaders in the room today who probably feel quite urgent about what they're doing, but what percentage do you need, or how do you get to that critical mass of maybe when others around you don't seem urgent and it just feels like you've got no momentum? What's your experience on getting to that critical mass point?
It's interesting. Just on this latest change, which is to start 6 new sites, and I realised that first of all I had to find it, and enough to actually get some urgency in myself. I then started talking to my senior leadership team, and actually I realised there was a bit of pushback. Middle of COVID pandemic, we'd also had to stop one site as well, so there was a little inertia there. They were a bit gun shy. And so that took me 6 months. It was longer than normal because of COVID, and I just like to allow it and allow each one. And then actually just after Christmas, we ran a prayer meeting for a whole week for the church, and we just prayed every day. And now and then they said, look, run a Friday prayer meeting every week. So literally what I've noticed is I've now got 20, 30, 40 people, at least, I would say far more than that, beginning to have some buy-in, some sense that this is happening. So it just takes time, and you just keep working and understanding it. If it takes you a while, takes your leadership a while, then you've got to give everybody the same time. So, and it's like the steam engine, if I can use that thing. And in the end, it varies. There's no, I don't think, I mean, the tipping point is book, and that analogy is part of it, but actually just getting that traction, it just depends how big you need to get traction. I think that would be the
brilliant. I mean, Sam's just mentioned here on the chat, he said as a leadership they realized that their church felt quite broken, didn't work, and they went on a path of building momentum. So I guess he's kind of echoing what you're saying there. But obviously it's massively key that you've got your team with momentum and you've got your team with urgency. And like you said, there are even times when there's a bit of pushback from some members of the team. Maybe their gifting's a bit more pastoral than drive, and so you would definitely say getting your whole team on board is absolutely key here.
Yeah, how do you ensure urgency doesn't become like whipping people up? That's a massive question. I think it has to be real. People have to understand it's real. So it has to be. The Bible talks about your conscience, that actually you need to address. So people need time to feel like they're not being pushed into this, or just it's a rah-rah. To be honest with you, if you do that then it will in the end fizzle out. And unfortunately, the reason change is so important to get right is the majority of change ends up in cynicism if we're not
Very
careful.
Good. Yeah.
And we've got so many middle-aged cynical people in the church because, in a sense, leaders have whipped up, use that, and not delivered. And so that's why I'm passionate that we do it well, and we take our time. We do everything we can to actually make it possible. I don't know if that answers that question.
That's a great question. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, what a great question. Getting that balance right. That's absolutely right. So that sense of creating urgency is really important. So you would then take us on to the next step. What would that be?
Yeah, the next step for me is defining success. And I did wonder sometimes which way you put this around, but so this isn't totally order, if you understand what I mean, because slightly you can mix these a bit, but the reality is we do need to define success. And for me, there's a couple of things that are important. First of all, which everybody, I guess, on this call will be aware of, vision, which is a kind of the arrowhead for me. You know, so just for us, let's I say this is literally where we're at. When I first came to Manchester, it was like plant 20 sites. That was my vision. Got 8 going, and then 8 churches. In this new multi-site, in that context, we're now going to go for 6 more. So actually, that's the arrowhead. That's what I felt God speak to me. Start 6 sites reasonably simultaneously. Pioneer them. That's in the next year or two. So that's the kind of defining success. But I would say this, that we need to be a bit more comprehensive than that. And what do I mean by that? You see, we could start 6 sites. We could move people from some of our original sites to it. And what could happen is we could destabilize those sites, get 6 new going. We've got 300 adults in our this latest multi-site that we've got. We could end up with 250 adults and a number more sites. Do you understand? So for me, defining success, I think sometimes needs to be a little bit more comprehensive than just the arrowhead. So what do I mean? It means I need to think we need to be 400 or 500 people overall with the outcome of this. Otherwise, actually, it isn't real success.
Sure.
So the success is the arrowhead 6 sites, but it's the comprehensive nature of that. We're here to grow. we're changing to grow. And so I think that's really, really important. And that's really where the Harvard Business School statistics and others come in. Actually, when they look at the comprehensive outcomes, actually, they're not that good. Sure. And unfortunately, that is so true in churches. That, you know, and that's what cynicism, that builds cynicism in people, it builds disappointment in people. And when the next set of leaders set a vision and a goal, they're, you know, a bit back on the back foot. So that means to say it needs to be measurable. Okay, so actually we need to be able to measure what we're doing. And some church leaders love it. I tend to love it when we're in a good place, and I tend to not love it when we're not doing very well. But the whole point of measuring is to know what. So it's again very, very important. I do feel we are often in danger of redefining just to make it look okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we're changing, we just got to be honest and real that this is what we want, and we do need to be able to measure it. And I think also you need some helpful tools. There's some helpful things and out in the kind of world. We use a tool called the house model, and it's actually explained in a book called A Dream with a Deadline. Now, I'm not saying this is the only one, it's just the one that we use. And I mean, this shows how to clarify your vision and where you want to go. And it shows you how to get there. It kind of puts strategy, vision, timelines, and it's quite it's all on one sheet of paper. So you can actually see it. Now, please don't, I'm not saying that's the best. I'm using it as an illustration that sometimes we need to be able to see the bigger picture, be able to put it into some goals, some steps, to see the breadth of it. And I say there's some really helpful tools out there just to help us as we do this. And I think the last thing I just want to say, I'm doing these very quickly just to get through. Losses and gains. You know, the UK audience wants the reality spelt out and losses and gains, no spin. I think that's just important, that actually as we're changing. So for us, when we're looking at 6 new sites, there's a cost element to that we've been talking about. Where are the Sunday school teachers coming from? People ask me. We haven't got enough worship leaders and musicians for the 5 meetings at 4 sites we've got now. So, and then there's a community loss. There's people going to lose their, you know, I say lose their friends. You know, I mean, as soon as you're in another group, you don't kind of lose them, but you lose touch. I think is the John Wimber used to call it the rip effect. That every time you multiplied, you ripped relationships. Every time you started something new,
very good,
you rip relation. And he basically says you can't keep ripping relationships because in the end, people just struggle.
Can I come in there? Because I mean, I think you're making some really good points about measuring. What's been some of your experience of maybe where you've not got that right? You've sort of learned some lessons and moved on from there. Sam's made a good point there. He says, how do you stop measuring and being comprehensive from simply becoming a numbers game? You know, not a lot of leaders, or you go to a conference and say, how many people have you got in your church? And often we define success and we measure success of, you know, bottoms on seats.
I tell you this, my first 2 church plants I planted were not that successful. And I think it got to 50 and I got to 70 over quite a few years. This was down in the south. And I remember the second one I did, there was another, I'm a New Frontiers main leader, and there was another New Frontiers church plant just down the road. And that got to 150 in like, and I used to run the region. And when they came, and I was still on my 30 people and going nowhere fast. And I just hated any time anybody said, put your hand up, how many people in your church? I thought, no, I don't want to. So I understand that side of it. But on the positive side of it, if you can't, you've got to have some sort of way of measuring success. Now, in the end, it might not be numbers that we're after. You know, it might be growth in people. Or, do you know what I mean? That's so I think it's not just. And I think the other thing is, I tend to try and be as conservative as I can.
Sure.
If I can use that. Now, here is me saying we're going to go for 6 new sites. But actually, everybody in my church knows that starts with 2 people each.
Yeah.
I'll come to that in a minute. So, in a sense, I don't think you can get away from the fact that you've got to measure somehow, or it's good to measure.
Of course. Just so on that note, then, because you know, some people say, you know, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but we also want to promise as well. And getting that balance right in the context of measuring success.
Yes, and I think there's time as well. I think that's what most people don't give enough time.
What a great point.
So I think the reality is, don't you just, you know, how simply becoming a numbers game. You can't have that. It kills everybody. Having said that, we are looking at numbers, you know, and you know, it gives us an indication. We look at finance, it gives us an indication. And so I just I think I also there's seasons as well.
Sure.
And then I helped set up a whole training thing for reaching into the 1040 window. So we have lots of people now planting churches in Muslim areas. The reality is, if they get 5-6 people in a 10-year period, it's a massive success. If you go to the east of Manchester, where it's very poor, it's very kind of just stuck in lots of different ways, demographically and in social demographics, everything like that. Actually, it's so much harder to plant a church there than it is in another place where it's student land, where the reality is you click your finger and you can get some people if you do some of the good things. So I think there's when we're looking at this and when we're doing measure, we need to measure in context as well. So it's what God's saying. It's actually
that could
that
could be seasonal then,
Correct. And and things change. So we're actually, one of our biggest growth parts now in our multi-site is in the poorer area of Manchester. Right. But that's because now there's a big community centre there. That's one of 2 our people have helped build, raise money for, been working there with the poor for 20 years. So actually there's a whole fruit coming from all of that. So that's like a 20-year work. And now, do you understand?
Absolutely.
So I think
Brilliant. Just Sarah's asked a question. What was Rebecca's asked a question. What was the name of the book you just mentioned, please? Was it A Dream with a Deadline, or?
Yeah, it's called a Dream with a Deadline.
There you go, Rebecca.
And it explains what's called a house model. It's just a dome. Please, it's just one way. It's the way we pick this up and use it quite extensively across all the new things that we do. Is that
that's great.
I'm
just aware of the time, and we could talk all day about defining success, I think, because it's such a big topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess here we go. It's another question coming in. Can you say something more about encouraging middle-aged cynics? I guess the generation that have had, like I said, they've been overpromised, and the church is almost undelivered. There are a lot of them around in our churches now. The question: how do we encourage some of those middle-aged cynics that have been on the road?
We have to. I mean, I could spend a whole seminar on this because I'm passionate about it. We've got to spend time with them. I spend personal time with them. They're often not only that, they're the most busiest people. Families in kind of teenage families, middle management, a lot of them, if they're in that sort of world. Do you know what I mean? So they're pressed by a lot of different things, as well as feeling under, a bit disappointed.
And yet they're some of our most gifted people, aren't they?
Correct. So I think for me, I spend time with them. I do spend a lot of time when we're doing new things, explaining, getting their feedback, their buy-in. So I help try address some of their cynicism, and I actually face it straight on as well, so that they understand what it is. And a lot of them are real, and they value the straight talk. And they also value explanation, so they'll want it more explained. So we're going to come on to the next is blockers, and these people can come seemingly blockers, and actually
they're too experienced in the faith to accept blag, aren't they?
Correct. So I just feel they're absolutely worth working with. That's my
very good. Okay.
But it's time and faith. You're wanting their faith to grow. You're wanting them to get some wins. You've
almost got to create fresh vision in that age group, almost, haven't you?
Correct. But knowing where you're starting from, which is unfortunately a long way back.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So coming on to blockers then, obviously that leads naturally into that one. I know it's a pet, I know it's a favourite of yours.
Well, it's yes. The I think so. Let's just look at identifying blockers, because every time there's a change, we get resistance. And I just want to look at a few different types of. These are people, but I'm using a different terminology.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the first one I want to look at and highlight is the people that say, "I don't need the hassle." Okay. And Paul Strevel, who writes about business, he says this: for senior managers, change means opportunity, both for their business and for themselves. But for many employees, change is seen as disruptive and intrusive. And he goes on to say, to help win these people, we need to understand that they perceive the things that are going to happen as not very helpful to them and just hassle. And I think that's totally true to a lot of church people. Actually, leaders come big vision, start 6 new sites, or do this, start we want to buy a building, whatever, and they just sometimes see it as just hassle. Life is difficult enough as it is, and I think we've just got to be careful that we don't. I think when sometimes people are blockers, we can get edgy with them. We can be dismissive with them. I think sometimes just got to see what it is. And as Strevel says here, we've got to put ourselves in their shoes.
Very good.
And we've got to help navigate them through. So instead of seeing them as blockers that are just kind of like a brick wall, actually, these are people that need help, because they're going to be people that are going to really help us through the long term. So in a sense, our goal is to help these become unblocked.
Yeah.
Second one I want to highlight is, where do I fit? And the reality is that in business, on any senior leadership team that's going through major change, this is probably the number one thing that actually people think about. And you know what it is? On a leadership team in a church, it's exactly the same. And in Jesus' disciples, it was exactly the same. As soon as Jesus says things are going to change, I'm going to Jerusalem, the kingdom's coming. Now we understand that they didn't understand what that quite meant. But you know what they did? Where do I fit, Jesus?
Very good. Yeah.
Where do I fit? That's the first thing they wanted to know. I want to be on your left. I want to be on your right. They're just so it's a natural thing, especially in a senior leadership team, is where, and I'm involved in a big church, 1,000+ people at the moment, helping them go through major change. And the reality is, one of the guys said, I don't know if I've got a job. Actually, when he looked at the new things that are happening, everybody started seeing where do they fit in the new normal, in the new shape. And they all knew it all had to change. There was no, there was urgency there. There was real buy-in. But the reality is, as soon as they saw, well, actually, for us to grow and get this on for the next phase, the jobs are all got to shift. And it's really, really important that, again, if we don't help navigate people through this, that it really does become a blocker. And I think it was Cotter said that actually this is one of the big reasons why things don't get changed.
I guess at its worst, it can become a church splitter, can't it?
Oh, at its worst. But the main thing is, it just becomes an anchor to change. So I've been just after Christmas, I spent a lot of time helping individuals in that team navigate where they are. In my team here, when we did some change through COVID so that we could start these new sites and stuff, my senior leadership all had to change a bit, and one of them's actually had a massive change. Actually doing a master's degree. They're going to start a master's degree as well, just because could see that actually the future was actually going to be this way in terms of teaching.
Yeah.
So actually individuals have a roadmap is really important.
So would you work with not obviously not just leadership team members, but some of those sort of key people that when you start to affect change, do you develop like a roadmap, almost like individial roadmaps?
As much as I can, as I can.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty thorough, and and also these are people's lives.
Yeah, of course.
And more than anything else, I want people, and they know that, which actually helps change. They know that I want the best, and it's easy to say that, but if you do it enough, you get credibility. And I don't know how many miles I've walked with individuals, even through COVID, where you're allowed to do the one-on-one walking, just helping them just navigate themselves, where they are. Okay, your job was quite senior. It's got to change.
So here's the $6 million question then. You've walked miles with people because change is the right direction for you, but they still come to that place where they think, you know what, I just can't walk with you. I can't go with that change. How do you navigate almost like a separation?
Let's do that in a moment.
Okay.
So just a couple of more things, and then I'll tackle that one.
Brilliant.
Or at least. So we've got to understand that and it's a bit implicit in one of the questions here. Not everybody's motivated by numbers. In fact, the reality is a lot of people are not. A lot more people are motivated by people change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, so to say that we want 500 people and we want 6 new sites. I'm using where I'm at the moment all the time, just I'm supposed to just jump in about different illustrations. But some of my church people just love the numbers. Some of my leadership team just love the numbers. Others, it actually makes them less than positive. Actually, it's a turn off. I need to understand where people are coming from. So, we do a lot of work with the poor. We do a lot of work with different groups of people. Now, we are interested in changing people, helping people, raising people out of poverty. It's really important when we're looking at change that actually we're able to put it holistically, and that actually is a big motivator. And sometimes some people are blocking because they're hearing something that actually is a turn off for them. Whereas if it's put in a way that they understand and are motivated, which is a person, not a number, a changed life, not a bottom on a seat.
Sure.
So I think that's really important. And again, what I'm trying to say is some people appear to be blockers, and it's the way we are treating them.
Very good.
Or appealing to them that's creating that block in them. And actually we can undo that, and we can help them. We can navigate them through.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's worth just even repeating. Some people appear to be blockers, but it can be the way they're being treated.
Yeah, and but the terminology we're using, which motivates us and demotivates
that's really
them.
Good. That's really, really good.
I would say that, yeah. And we've touched on the past failures and disappointments. Actually, another thing I tend to do, the question, how do you help people who are cynical? Read Zechariah and Haggai. and read how they helped Zerubbabel and Joshua. Basically, Joshua and Zerubbabel were the middle-aged, disappointed people who felt like all their dreams, nothing's going to happen. And look at the way that Zechariah helped both. If you just read Zechariah, you see a restoration of a cynic,
wow.
a restoration
wow.
of a, I say cynic, a disappointed
Very good. Yeah.
person. And then look at how Haggai basically helped the people, and that's to create change. And they talked to them, they restored them, but they got their hands dirty with them. And that's the other thing that I do with people is I work with them. I get them on the, if I can use the ladder is the wrong word, but I get them into a role, and then I really give myself to it as well.
Yeah.
So,
brilliant.
And that's what, if you look at those two prophets, how they got a people and a leadership team from failure to success, and through a massive change of mindset and everything. Anyway, and moving and removing.
Yeah,
okay?
this is, yeah. Wow.
I'll do 1 minute. No, it's just a big subject. Again, I think in the end, Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan," because that was an ultimate blocker. You are not going to Jerusalem, Jesus? Yes, I am. So there was no negotiation on that point. And sometimes I think you get to a point, first of all, that there's no negotiation. And Paul did it exactly the same with John Mark. I'm going to stay over here, and you're not going. and Barnabas basically disagreed, and they split. So I think the reality is, where possible, we have to be generous. We have to have given it everything. But we have to understand that sometimes people need to do something different. And then if that's the case, I said, for me, having been patient, having worked as much as we can, realizing actually this is a change that's got to happen, then I think we've got to be as generous as we can to help that happen. And I've helped some churches navigate this. I've had to do it internally myself, sometimes better than others. But in the end, God had a good work for John Mark and Barnabas.
Yeah, of course.
And Peter actually came into line, actually. So, you know what I mean? So I don't know. That's a very short answer to a long thing, but I guess in the end, there's a reality that sometimes people need to move on. We need to bless them. We need to understand that sometimes it's because we've changed the number on the bus. What the bus they got on was going this way, and our change is going that way.
Sure.
It's our problem because we've put the number on.
So we kind of created it in a way.
We create it, and I think so many leaders don't own that.
Sure.
They see this person can't, it's their problem. No, it's. I remember in New Frontiers in the early days, we were coastlands. We were kind of a loose affiliation, and God said to us, become tight, knit together, become like a herd of elephants.
Yeah.
And actually, I remember Terry Virgo saying, I just want everyone to know we're putting a new number on the bus. You've got to kind of, do you want to be on that bus? Because it's our problem.
Yeah. I think, Colin, this is such a poignant point that you're making here today, because I think I'm sure there are leaders in the room right now while you're speaking thinking, we have changed the direction of our church, we've gone a completely different route that those people never gave their lives to. They gave their lives to what was set up 20 years ago, and now all of a sudden you've almost like tipped their life upside down within the church. I mean, you've touched on it a bit, but you know, do you try and create another role for them as much as possible,
oh yeah,
or
I
those
mean,
sorts of things?
I go head over
Yeah,
heels to try and help people without losing
sure,
momentum.
sure. Difficult balance then.
And it's, I think, to be honest with you, every change needs
Yeah.
time. If a leader hasn't got time to do this sort of work, don't instigate change.
Wow, that's some statement.
Well, because the reality is you're going to hurt people's
Yeah.
lives. So, you know, I say I get involved. I was involved in a church in Dubai. I think I went 28 times, and once I went for 24 hours just to help a person, one of the key leaders, because we were going through a big change. So just if you don't give time, it's not fair, in my opinion. And so I would say if you're going through a big change, you have to get your diary, because that's what people need as much as anything else.
So
okay.
Setting a plan for change and a time scale is essential then.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I say we're going to open this up on our broadcast website a lot more, and just because it's every bit of it is a talk in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great though. Thank you.
But I just want to say, so I've got a few more minutes.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we've got another 10 minutes.
Okay. So fourth bit is changing culture. Yeah. So what I mean by culture is how things are done around here. And it's the behaviors, the shapes. It's what actually people feel and when they come into your church, people. And the interesting thing is that every group of people has a culture. It's either predetermined or just there. But that's the truth. So these are a few things I would say about culture. In the end, it's culture that's your biggest win. So for us, actually building, it's not just saying we want to build a culture, we want to build 6 new sites, like I say, plant 6 new sites. Actually, it's creating the culture in the church that allows that to happen and allows people to join. So for us, we have 6 cultures in the book I've written. That's a third of the book. We have a second chance culture, because that really helps even now, middle-aged. Have a go, think the best, generous, wholehearted, forward-looking, and good food. And we work hard because we know they're the cultures that help us to be on the front foot to pioneer.
Brilliant.
And now, what I would say, and I need to be quite quick on this. These are things that I think is a good thing to do. First of all, is identify what culture you've got in your church now. And it might scare you when you find out. So we actually, even though we've got that, we realized we were one culture at least missing and that was missional. Actually, people able to share the gospel. So we were accidentally missional. we were missional as we were starting new things, but evangelistically we were accidental, if I can use that.
Yeah.
We're spending this next year, we're right in the middle of it, working right through the church to actually bring that much more into our world, so that actually we're equipped. I was on a call this morning with some of our Indians in our church, because I've got a community group full of Indian nurses and doctors and people like that, and we talk about food. How can we use food to get our friends? And so all I'm trying to say is identify and then determine, which is what we did and what we do, what are the cultures that you need to work at. And I say it's a totally big thing. We've written about it lots, but it's such an important thing, because in the end, it's the thing that hinders you, and it's the thing that actually gets you traction. So it's all right saying we want a friendly culture in our church. have you got a friendly culture in your church? The way you find that out is you ask all the new people who come.
So what you're saying is culture really does define you.
Correct.
On every level.
Everybody's. Yeah. Yeah, those 6 points of culture. This is the 6 we've got, and I said we've written about them in the book. There's a chapter on each one. We've got a second chance culture. Failure is not failure. Have a go. Think the best. Be generous. Forward-looking. Wholehearted. Good food.
Brilliant.
Okay, and we're just adding now into it missional. Now you can't, and we went one at a time. Do you understand? I mean, from our leadership down's the wrong word, but from our leadership up, you could argue. So, like the good food, when we are in person, our elders meetings, we always have a curry to start.
I think you've got most of us there.
I guess what I'm trying to say is we try and live out what we're doing from our everything in. So if our leadership team is not doing it, so we're all involved in these 6 new sites. Have a go. We're all there in some form or other.
Somebody's just said, could you just mention those 6 culture points again?
I've done it. That's why I did it.
Cool. Thanks.
And can read a book.
We will.
Okay. So that it's. I think so often leadership teams don't mirror the culture that they're trying to produce, and so what they do is they produce a different type of culture, which often is striving, etc.
Yeah, brilliant. So, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. I don't know if you've got. I'd love to just be able to just say a little bit about your book as well. Where can they get that from?
If they email me, colinbarron@mac.com, I could.
So, are you happy if I put your email on the main event chat? That's great.
Yeah, and also the Amazon book. Amazon, it's on Amazon. I think. The other thing about culture is this. Sometimes, the culture the church has got is okay for what it is. And sometimes we try and change it when actually we should start a new church.
Okay.
So the Anglican Church in Manchester realized they needed a different culture to reach a lot of Muslim background people in some poor areas. So they basically started a thing called the Antioch Network, which is it's a parallel church network. It's Anglican, but it can go in and out of different parishes, because they realized trying to change a parish church to do it was impossible. And why bother if it's doing okay? So sometimes we try and change like an attractional big church into something that's missional and small, when actually we should start a parallel.
So sort of like a motorway, create another lane.
Why break something that's not broken? And I think leaders so often are trying to break because they've got a new idea. Well, do it somewhere else.
Brilliant.
Sorry,
no, that's great. That's great.
What's the third? Think the best. Can we type these in at the end?
Yeah, we will.
Sorry, I just got 1 minute. Final thing, which is create some short-term wins, which you celebrate, you communicate. So a short-term win just for our 6 new sites is this. We're starting 6 little prayer groups. So one of our sites, we want to reach the Spanish speakers in Manchester. So I'm on a little prayer group, 5-6 of us, and half an hour. We're going to start a Hindi speaking one next Saturday night. We've already started one for Stockport. One we're going to start. So everybody in our church know. Okay, the first short-term win is half a dozen people on a Zoom call every other week praying. So we're going to be praying in Hindi, apart from me. I'll be there. I've told them, do the Hindi. I'll speak in tongues.
Brilliant.
Spanish one is the same. That just is just a snapshot.
Superb. Colin, this has been brilliant, and we could unpack all of those points for an hour each, probably, and beyond. We've put your web link up, but it's called the broadcastnetwork.org, and that's where people can subscribe, get on board, come to webinars, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically doing three. I mean, there's loads of free training on there. It's just, but actually, it just happened, which is why I was asked to do this. We're going to do 3 webinars: one for church leaders, one for pioneer church planters, and one for movement leaders. 3 to 6 webinars on each, which will unpack a lot of these
brilliant
things on a much with other people's voices.
Yeah, great.
So movement leaders and people like that who,
yeah. Look, we're getting loads of people just really showing their appreciation for what you shared. It's just some really good, insightful stuff. You've mentioned a few phrases that you really are going to get our sort of our academic and our brain juices going there, as well as touching our spirits as well. Love it if you just pray for us just before we finish. We're all involved in growing churches, wanting to multiply, looking to grow and navigate our way through change. So thank you on behalf of everyone this afternoon. Thank you so much for that. It's brilliant. And if you could just pray for us, that'd be great.
Okay. I want to say, the Lord bless you. And I want to say, let the Lord's face shine upon you. I want to pray, God, that in your blessing and in your face shining upon us, I want to pray, God, would you help us as we lead, as we're part of churches, to have the wisdom of Christ, to know the things we should be doing. I want to pray, God, just help us. I thank you that we're in a time of change. I pray, help us to have all the wisdom from on high, that we can actually lead people through change. And I do pray for your blessing. And I do pray, Lord God, that you would so shine your light on us. We love you, Lord, and we bless you. And thank you for this hour together. Amen.
Yeah, amen, amen indeed. Thank you so much. That was great, wasn't it? And I've just put Colin Barron's email address on the feed there. So if you want to email him and you'd like to get that book, Multi-Planting, which looks absolutely brilliant with most of this stuff inside of that. So Colin, thank you on behalf of Pioneer today for coming and sharing with us. We really appreciate that so much to feed our thinking. So bless you.
Thank you.
And we'll hopefully bump into you again.
Okay,
thank you very much. God bless. Thanks, everyone. I think